In this video, we delve into a collection of unsettling and creepy stories that are sure to send chills down your spine. Each tale is steeped in an atmosphere of suspense, drawing you into the eerie experiences that many have encountered. From inexplicable occurrences to encounters with the unknown, these narratives tap into our primal fears, reminding us of the darkness that lurks just beyond the light. As we explore these spine-tingling accounts, we invite you to reflect on your own experiences with fear and the uncanny. The stories shared here are not just figments of imagination. They resonate with the relatable nature of our deepest anxieties. Whether it's the fear of being watched, the dread of the unknown, or the unsettling feeling that something is amiss, these tales echo the universal human experience of confronting the inexplicable. So, prepare yourself for a journey into the shadows, where each story unfolds with a gripping intensity that will keep you on the edge of your seat, questioning what lies beyond the veil of reality. On a crisp autumn morning, a group of friends set out for what was supposed to be an exhilarating hike through the dense woods of a nearby national park. The air was filled with laughter and excitement as they packed their gear, each friend eager to escape the hustle and bustle of daily life and immerse themselves in nature. The vibrant colors of the leaves painted a picturesque backdrop, and the sun filtered through the trees, casting playful shadows on the trail. As they began their ascent, the camaraderie among them was palpable, with jokes and stories shared, the thrill of adventure igniting their spirits. However, as they ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere began to shift. The trail narrowed, and the sounds of their laughter faded into an unsettling silence. It was then that they stumbled upon something peculiar, a clearing that seemed out of place. In the center lay a collection of strange, weathered masks, each one intricately carved and adorned with symbols that none of them recognized. Alongside the masks were scattered notes, yellowed with age, filled with cryptic messages that hinted at rituals and warnings about the forest. The friends exchanged uneasy glances, their initial excitement giving way to a creeping sense of dread. What had they stumbled upon? As they examined the masks and notes, an eerie feeling settled over them, as if unseen eyes were watching from the shadows of the trees. The laughter that had once echoed through the woods was replaced by an unsettling quiet, amplifying the rustling of leaves and the distant call of a crow. The friends tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to their overactive imaginations, but the tension in the air was undeniable. They decided to press on, hoping to leave the strange clearing behind, but the sense of being watched lingered, growing stronger with each step they took. As they continued their hike, the atmosphere became increasingly oppressive. The sun, once a warm companion, seemed to dim, casting long, distorted shadows that danced around them. Whispers of wind rustled through the branches, and the friends found themselves glancing over their shoulders, half expecting to see someone, or something, lurking just out of sight. The trail twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the heart of the woods, where the trees grew thicker and the light faded further. Suddenly, one of the friends let out a startled gasp. They had come across another clearing, but this one was different. In the center stood a figure, cloaked in darkness, its face obscured by one of the very masks they had found earlier. The figure stood motionless, as if waiting for them. Panic surged through the group, and they instinctively took a step back, their hearts racing. The figure remained silent, its presence heavy with an unspoken threat. In that moment, the friends realized they were not alone in the woods. The eerie feeling of being watched had transformed into a palpable sense of danger. They turned to flee, retracing their steps with adrenaline coursing through their veins. The laughter and excitement of the morning felt like a distant memory, replaced by the urgency to escape whatever dark force had drawn them into this unsettling experience. As they raced back down the trail, the woods seemed to close in around them, the shadows lengthening and the whispers growing louder, urging them to leave before it was too late. On a seemingly ordinary Saturday morning, Sarah decided to embark on a solo hike through the sprawling trails of the nearby forest. The sun was shining brightly, and the air was crisp, invigorating her spirit as she set off on the well-trodden path. The rhythmic crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant chirping of birds created a serene backdrop, lulling her into a sense of peace. However, As she ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere began to shift. The trees grew denser, their towering trunks casting long shadows that danced ominously in the dappled sunlight. As Sarah rounded a bend in the trail, she spotted a figure in the distance. At first, she thought nothing of it, a fellow hiker, perhaps. But as she drew closer, an unsettling feeling washed over her. The man stood alone, partially obscured by the thick underbrush, his back turned to her. He wore a dark, tattered jacket, and his hair hung long and unkempt, blending into the shadows of the forest. There was something about his stillness that sent a chill down her spine. Instinctively, Sarah slowed her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. The man remained motionless, as if he were waiting for something or someone. A sense of danger prickled at the back of her mind, urging her to turn back. But curiosity held her in place for a moment longer. She cleared her throat, attempting to break the silence, but the words caught in her throat. The man turned slightly, just enough for her to catch a glimpse of his face. His eyes were dark and hollow, devoid of warmth, and a shiver ran through her as their gazes locked for a brief moment. In that instant, Sarah's instincts kicked in. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to flee. She took a step back, her breath quickening as she turned on her heel and began to retrace her steps. The forest, once a place of solace, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows, closing in around her. The sound of her footsteps echoed in her ears, and she could feel the weight of the man's gaze on her back, a palpable presence that seemed to follow her as she hurried away. As she navigated the winding trail, the sense of danger intensified. The rustling of leaves and the distant calls of wildlife morphed into a cacophony of ominous sounds, amplifying her fear. Every snap of a twig felt like a warning, every gust of wind a reminder that she was not alone. She quickened her pace, her heart racing as she fought against the rising panic. The thought of the strange man lurking behind her haunted her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her every move. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sarah burst into a clearing where the sunlight poured in, illuminating the space and momentarily dispelling the shadows that had clung to her. She paused to catch her breath, her chest heaving as she scanned the area for any sign of the man. But the clearing was empty, and the only sound was the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. The encounter had left an indelible mark on her psyche, a lingering sense of unease that would follow her long after she left the woods. As she made her way back to the trailhead, Sarah couldn't shake the image of the man from her mind. The darkness in his eyes, the stillness of his figure. It all replayed in her thoughts like a haunting melody. The hike that had begun as an escape from reality had transformed into a nightmare, and she knew that she would never look at the forest the same way again. The experience had awakened a primal fear within her, a reminder of the unpredictability of the world and the hidden dangers that lurked just beyond the familiar. In the days that followed, Sarah found herself avoiding the woods, her once beloved hiking trails now a source of anxiety. The encounter had changed her, instilling a wariness that permeated her daily life. She became hyper-aware of her surroundings, constantly scanning for any signs of danger, even in the most mundane situations. The strange man had become a specter in her mind, a representation of the unknown that could emerge at any moment, shattering her sense of safety. Though she tried to rationalize the encounter, telling herself that it was likely just a harmless stranger, the fear lingered like a shadow, a reminder of the fragility of her security. The woods, once a sanctuary, had morphed into a place of dread, and the thrill of adventure was overshadowed by the haunting memory of that chilling encounter. Sarah knew that she would carry the weight of that experience with her, a constant reminder of the darkness that could lurk in the most unexpected places. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, where the houses were neatly lined and the lawns meticulously manicured, there lived a neighbor named Mr. Thompson. At first glance, he seemed like an ordinary man, perhaps a bit reserved, but nothing out of the ordinary. When Sarah and her family moved in next door, they were eager to meet him, hoping to foster a sense of community. Their initial interactions were polite, He greeted them with a curt nod and a half-hearted smile, his eyes darting away as if he were uncomfortable with eye contact. There was something peculiar about his demeanor, a subtle oddness that lingered in the air, but they brushed it off as shyness. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah began to notice more of Mr. Thompson's strange behavior. He would often stand in his yard for long periods, staring at the ground or the trees, as if lost in thought. Occasionally, he would mumble to himself, his words barely audible, creating an unsettling atmosphere that made her question his mental state. The way he moved was also peculiar. He seemed to glide rather than walk, his footsteps silent on the pavement. It was as if he were trying to blend into the background, yet his presence was impossible to ignore. One evening, as Sarah was watering her garden, she caught Mr. Thompson watching her from his porch. His gaze was intense, almost predatory, and it sent a shiver down her spine. She waved politely, but he didn't respond. Instead, he continued to stare, his expression unreadable. The encounter left her feeling uneasy, a sensation that grew stronger with each passing day. She confided in her husband, Mark, about her discomfort, but he dismissed her concerns, suggesting that Mr. Thompson was simply an eccentric old man. However, Sarah's instincts told her otherwise. The unease escalated when she began to notice Mr. Thompson's intrusive actions. He would often appear in places where he shouldn't be, like the local park where she took her children to play. One afternoon, while watching her kids swing, she spotted him sitting on a bench, his eyes fixed on her family. It was as if he were studying them, and the way he tilted his head slightly made her stomach churn. She felt exposed, as if he were dissecting their every move. When she approached her children, he quickly averted his gaze, pretending to be engrossed in a book, but the tension in the air was palpable. The following week, Sarah decided to confront her growing anxiety. She approached Mr. Thompson while he was trimming his hedges, hoping to engage him in conversation and perhaps understand his peculiarities better. "Hello, Mr. Thompson. How are you today?" she asked, forcing a smile. He looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly, and replied in a low voice, "Just keeping things tidy." There was an edge to his tone, a hint of something unsettling that made her heart race. The conversation quickly fizzled out, and she retreated to her home, feeling more uneasy than before. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah's sense of unease transformed into a constant state of vigilance. She began to pay closer attention to her surroundings, acutely aware of Mr. Thompson's movements. He seemed to have an uncanny ability to appear just when she least expected it. Whether she was gardening, taking out the trash, or simply sitting on her porch, he would emerge from his house, often standing silently, watching her with that same unsettling intensity. It was as if he were waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and the thought sent chills down her spine. One night, Sarah was awoken by a noise outside her window. Heart pounding, she peered through the curtains and spotted Mr. Thompson standing in his yard, illuminated by the pale glow of the moon. He was staring directly at her house, his expression inscrutable. Panic surged through her as she realized he had been watching her while she slept. She quickly pulled the curtains shut, her mind racing with fear. What was he doing out there? Why was he watching her? The questions spiraled, feeding her anxiety and paranoia. The next day, Sarah decided to take action. She called the local police department to report her concerns, explaining the strange behavior and her growing fear. The officer who answered assured her that they would keep an eye on the neighborhood but emphasized the importance of being aware of her surroundings. "Trust your instincts," he advised. "If something feels off, don't hesitate to reach out." His words resonated with her, and she vowed to remain vigilant. Despite her efforts to stay alert, the situation only worsened. One afternoon, while returning home from grocery shopping, Sarah noticed Mr. Thompson standing at the end of her driveway, his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't move as she approached, and an icy dread settled in her stomach. "Can I help you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He simply smiled, a slow, unsettling grin that sent shivers down her spine. "Just admiring your flowers," he replied. his voice dripping with an unsettling calmness. That night, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She locked all the doors and windows, her heart racing as she replayed the day's events in her mind. The unease had morphed into a palpable fear, and she found herself jumping at every little sound. The once peaceful neighborhood now felt like a prison, and Mr. Thompson was the warden, lurking just beyond her line of sight. As the weeks dragged on, Sarah's anxiety reached a breaking point. She began to avoid her yard, opting to stay indoors whenever possible. The children noticed her change in behavior, and she struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy. Mark, still skeptical of her fears, suggested they invite Mr. Thompson over for dinner, hoping to ease the tension. Reluctantly, Sarah agreed, but the thought of having him in her home filled her with dread. The night of the dinner arrived, and Sarah prepared nervously, her stomach churning with anxiety. When Mr. Thompson arrived, he was polite but distant, his odd demeanor only amplifying her discomfort. The conversation was stilted, punctuated by awkward silences that felt heavy with unspoken tension. As the evening wore on, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that he was studying her, analyzing her every reaction. After he left, Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was short-lived. The next day, she discovered that he had left a small package on her doorstep, a collection of flowers eerily similar to the ones in her garden. The note attached read, "Thought you might like these." The gesture felt invasive, and her heart raced as she realized he had been watching her closely enough to know her preferences. In the following days, Sarah's anxiety spiraled out of control. She became hyper-aware of her surroundings, constantly checking the windows and peering out the door. The neighborhood, once a safe haven, now felt like a trap, and Mr. Thompson was the predator lurking in the shadows. She confided in her friends, who urged her to trust her instincts and take precautions. They suggested installing security cameras and even considering a restraining order if his behavior escalated. One evening, as Sarah was preparing dinner, she caught a glimpse of Mr. Thompson through the kitchen window. He was standing in his yard, staring directly at her house, his expression unreadable. The sight sent a jolt of fear through her, and she quickly ducked out of view, her heart racing. She felt trapped, as if he were a ghost haunting her every move. The following week, Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. She approached the local community center to discuss her concerns with the neighborhood watch group. They listened attentively, sharing similar stories of odd behavior from Mr. Thompson. It turned out she wasn't alone in her fears. Others had noticed his strange actions and had begun to keep their distance. The group agreed to keep an eye on him, and Sarah felt a sense of relief knowing she wasn't facing this alone. Despite the support, the unease lingered. One night, as she lay in bed, she heard a soft tapping at her window. Her heart raced as she sat up, straining to listen. The tapping continued, rhythmic and persistent. Gathering her courage, she crept to the window and peered outside. To her horror, she saw Mr. Thompson standing there, his face illuminated by the moonlight, a twisted smile stretching across his lips. Panic surged through her, and she stumbled back, her breath quickening. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her hands shaking as she whispered her address. The operator assured her that help was on the way, but the wait felt like an eternity. She locked the bedroom door and huddled in the corner, her heart pounding in her chest. When the police arrived, they found Mr. Thompson still standing outside, his demeanor eerily calm. They questioned him, and after a brief conversation, they informed Sarah that he claimed he was simply trying to return a lost item. The officers assured her that they would keep an eye on him, but the encounter left her feeling more vulnerable than ever. In the days that followed, Sarah struggled to regain her sense of safety. The experience had left a lasting impact on her psyche, and she found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, hyper-aware of every sound and movement. The neighborhood that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a battleground, and she was determined to protect her family at all costs. Eventually, Sarah and her family decided to take a break from the neighborhood. They rented a cabin in the mountains, hoping to escape the suffocating fear that had taken root in their lives. The fresh air and serene surroundings provided a temporary reprieve, but the memories of Mr. Thompson haunted her. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching, lurking just beyond the trees. As they settled into their new routine, Sarah began to reflect on the importance of being aware of one's surroundings. The experience had taught her to trust her instincts, to listen to that nagging voice in her head that warned her when something felt off. She realized that awareness was not just about physical safety. It was about recognizing the signs of danger and taking action before it was too late. When they returned home, Sarah felt a renewed sense of determination. She installed security cameras around her property and joined the neighborhood watch group, becoming an active participant in her community's safety efforts. The experience with Mr. Thompson had changed her, but it had also empowered her to take control of her environment. Though the memories of that unsettling encounter would linger, Sarah knew that she had the strength to face her fears. She had learned the importance of vigilance and the power of community, and she was determined to create a safe haven for her family, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. The experience had been a harrowing journey, but it had also forged a resilience within her that would guide her through the darkness, reminding her always to be aware of her surroundings and to trust her instincts. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the overgrown yard of the abandoned house at the end of Maple Street. The once vibrant paint had faded to a dull gray, peeling away to reveal the weathered wood beneath. Weeds and wildflowers choked the pathway leading to the front door, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. As I stood before the house, a mix of dread and curiosity washed over me. It was a place that had long been forgotten, shrouded in mystery and whispers of the past. The house loomed before me, its broken windows resembling hollow eyes, watching my every move. I could feel the weight of its history pressing down on me, a palpable tension that made my skin crawl. My friends, Jake and Mia, stood beside me, their expressions a mix of excitement and apprehension. We had heard the stories, tales of strange noises and ghostly apparitions, but the thrill of exploration outweighed our fears. With a deep breath, I pushed open the creaking gate, the sound echoing in the stillness, and stepped onto the property. As we approached the front door, I hesitated, my heart racing. The door hung slightly ajar, as if inviting us in while simultaneously warning us to stay away. I exchanged glances with Jake and Mia, and after a moment of silent agreement, we stepped inside. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of mildew and dust. Sunlight filtered through the cracks in the boarded-up windows, casting eerie patterns on the floor. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of our footsteps echoing in the empty space. The interior of the house was a time capsule, frozen in a moment long gone. Faded wallpaper peeled away from the walls, revealing layers of history beneath. Furniture lay scattered, covered in a thick layer of dust, as if the occupants had simply vanished one day, leaving everything behind. A sense of unease settled over me, but my curiosity pushed me forward. I wandered into the living room, where an old, tattered sofa sat in the center, its fabric frayed and discolored. A dusty coffee table was littered with yellowed newspapers, their headlines barely legible. As I flipped through the pages, I felt a chill run down my spine. The articles spoke of strange occurrences in the neighborhood, disappearances, unexplained noises, and sightings of shadowy figures. I glanced at Jake and Mia, who were exploring the adjacent room, their laughter echoing through the house. I wanted to join them, but the weight of the articles lingered in my mind, feeding my growing sense of dread. I decided to explore the upstairs, the creaking staircase groaning under my weight as I ascended. The hallway was dimly lit, the air thick with dust motes dancing in the shafts of light. Each door I passed seemed to whisper secrets of the past, and I felt an overwhelming urge to open them. I reached for the first door on my left, its handle cold and rusty. With a gentle push, it swung open to reveal a small bedroom, untouched by time. The bed was unmade, the sheets yellowed and stained. A child's toy lay forgotten in the corner, a dusty teddy bear with one eye missing. I picked it up, feeling a wave of sadness wash over me. What had happened to the child who once played here? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, and I quickly set the bear back down, my heart racing. As I continued down the hallway, I noticed a door at the end, slightly ajar. A flicker of curiosity ignited within me, and I approached it cautiously. Pushing the door open, I was met with a sight that made my stomach drop. The room was filled with old photographs, their frames cracked and dusty. But it was the images themselves that sent a chill through me. Faces of people I didn't recognize, their expressions frozen in time, some smiling while others looked eerily serious. In the center of the room stood a large mirror, its surface clouded with grime. As I stepped closer, I caught a glimpse of my reflection, but something was off. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a shadowy figure standing behind me, but when I turned around, the room was empty. My heart raced as I shook off the feeling, convincing myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. I left the room, my mind racing with unease, and made my way back to the staircase. As I descended, I heard a faint sound, a soft whisper that seemed to echo through the halls. I paused, straining to listen, but the house fell silent once more. I glanced at Jake and Mia, who were now in the kitchen, their voices muffled as they rummaged through the cabinets. I joined them, eager to shake off the unsettling feeling that had settled over me. The kitchen was a mess of broken dishes and rotting food, the air thick with the smell of decay. As we searched through the cabinets, I stumbled upon an old journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. I opened it carefully, my heart pounding as I read the scrawled handwriting. The entries spoke of fear and paranoia, detailing the writer's descent into madness. They described hearing voices at night, feeling watched, and the growing belief that something sinister lurked within the house. A sense of dread washed over me as I read the final entry, which ended abruptly with a frantic scrawl. "It's coming for me." I closed the journal, my hands trembling. The atmosphere in the house had shifted, and I could feel the weight of its history pressing down on me. I glanced at Jake and Mia, who were now engrossed in their own discoveries, oblivious to the growing sense of unease that enveloped me. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from upstairs, causing us all to jump. We exchanged startled glances, our hearts racing. "What was that?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as we hesitated, unsure of what to do. The curiosity that had driven us to explore the house now felt like a dangerous game. "Let's check it out," Jake suggested, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. I nodded, though my instincts screamed at me to leave. We made our way back to the staircase, the air thick with tension. Each step felt heavier, the shadows around us deepening as we ascended. When we reached the top, we stood in the hallway, listening intently. The house was silent once more, but the feeling of being watched lingered in the air. We approached the door from which the sound had come, our hearts pounding in unison. I reached for the handle, my hand shaking as I turned it slowly. The door creaked open, revealing a darkened room filled with dust and cobwebs. In the center stood an old rocking chair, its movement eerily rhythmic as if someone had just been sitting in it. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped inside, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight. The atmosphere was thick with an unsettling energy, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the room, slamming the door shut behind us. Panic surged through me as I turned to the door, but it wouldn't budge. "What the hell?" Jake exclaimed, pulling at the handle. I could feel the walls closing in, the shadows growing darker. The rocking chair continued its eerie motion, and I felt a presence in the room, watching us from the corners of the darkness. "Let's get out of here," Mia shouted, her voice filled with fear. I joined Jake in pulling at the door, desperation fueling our efforts. Finally, with a loud bang, the door swung open, and we stumbled back into the hallway, gasping for breath. We stood there for a moment, our hearts racing as we processed what had just happened. The house felt alive, its walls whispering secrets we were never meant to uncover. "We need to leave," I said, my voice trembling. The thrill of exploration had turned into a nightmare, and I could no longer shake the feeling that something sinister lurked within the shadows. As we made our way back down the staircase, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. The air felt charged, and I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see a figure lurking in the darkness. We reached the front door, and I pushed it open, the sunlight flooding in like a lifeline. Once outside, we took a moment to catch our breath, the weight of the house lifting as we stepped onto the overgrown lawn. The sun felt warm against my skin, a stark contrast to the chill that had settled in my bones. We stood in silence, the reality of our experience sinking in. "What just happened in there?" Jake asked, his voice shaky. I shook my head, unable to find the words. The house had been a place of curiosity, but it had quickly turned into a realm of fear and uncertainty. As we walked away, I glanced back at the house, its broken windows staring back at me like hollow eyes. I knew that I would never forget the eerie experience of exploring that abandoned place. The unsettling atmosphere, the creeping dread, and the unexpected discoveries that had left a lasting mark on my psyche. The stories we had heard about the house echoed in my mind, and I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden within its walls. The experience had changed me, awakening a sense of caution that would linger long after we left. I realized that some places are better left undisturbed, their mysteries shrouded in darkness, waiting for the next curious soul to wander in. As we drove away, I felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. The abandoned house would remain a haunting memory, a reminder of the thin line between curiosity and danger. I vowed never to return, knowing that some doors are best left closed, and some shadows are better left unexplored. Walking into the gym that day, I felt a rush of excitement coursing through me. The air was filled with the familiar scent of sweat and determination, and the rhythmic sounds of weights clanking and treadmills humming created an energizing atmosphere. I had been looking forward to this workout all week, eager to push my limits and feel the endorphins kick in. The gym had become my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the stresses of daily life and focus on my health and fitness goals. As I made my way to the locker room, I noticed the usual buzz of activity around me. People were engaged in their routines, some lifting weights, others running on the treadmills, and a few participating in group classes. I felt a sense of camaraderie with my fellow gym-goers, all of us united by a common goal of self-improvement. I quickly changed into my workout gear, feeling the anticipation build as I prepared to hit the weights. After warming up, I headed to the free weights area, my favorite part of the gym. I was excited to tackle my strength training routine, feeling empowered as I picked up the dumbbells. I was in my zone, focusing on my form and breathing, when I noticed a gym worker, Alex, watching me from a distance. At first, I thought nothing of it. Perhaps he was just observing to ensure everyone was using the equipment safely. However, as I continued my workout, I felt his gaze lingering longer than necessary. Initially, I brushed it off, attributing it to my own insecurities. After all, I was there to improve myself, and it was natural to feel self-conscious in a place filled with fit individuals. But as I moved from one exercise to another, I couldn't shake the feeling that Alex was watching me intently. It was an unsettling sensation, like being under a microscope, and it began to chip away at my excitement. As I transitioned to the bench press, I caught Alex's eye again. This time, he approached me with a smile that felt forced. "Hey there, you're really pushing yourself today," he said, his tone overly enthusiastic. I smiled back politely, trying to focus on my workout. "Thanks. Just trying to stay on track," I replied, hoping to keep the conversation brief. But Alex didn't take the hint. He leaned against the bench, invading my personal space. I could show you some new techniques to maximize your gains," he suggested, his smile widening. I felt a knot form in my stomach. While I appreciated the offer, something about his demeanor felt off. It was as if he was more interested in me than in helping me improve my workout. "Thanks, but I'm good for now," I said, attempting to maintain a friendly tone while asserting my boundaries. I could feel my discomfort growing, and I wanted to get back to my routine without further interruption. However, Alex didn't seem to take my response seriously. He continued to linger, watching me as I completed my set, his eyes following my every movement. The more he hovered, the more uncomfortable I became. I could feel my heart rate increasing, not from the workout but from the anxiety of his presence. I tried to focus on my breathing, reminding myself that I was here to work out, not to engage in unwanted attention. I shifted my weight and moved to the next station, hoping to create some distance between us. Unfortunately, Alex followed me, his enthusiasm unwavering. "You're really dedicated. It's great to see someone so committed," he said, his voice dripping with a tone that felt overly familiar. I forced a smile, but inside, I was beginning to feel trapped. I had come to the gym to escape the pressures of life, not to deal with an uncomfortable situation that was making me feel vulnerable. As I moved through my workout, I noticed that Alex was now standing closer than before, his body language invasive. He would occasionally offer unsolicited advice, even when I hadn't asked for it. "You might want to adjust your grip on that," he said, leaning in too close for comfort. I felt a wave of irritation mixed with anxiety. I didn't want to be rude, but I also didn't want to engage in a conversation that felt forced and uncomfortable. I decided to take a break and headed to the water fountain, hoping to create some space. As I filled my bottle, I glanced around the gym, trying to regain my composure. I could see other gym-goers engrossed in their workouts, completely unaware of the discomfort I was experiencing. It struck me how important personal boundaries were in a place like this, where everyone was focused on their own goals. When I returned to the weights, I noticed Alex was still watching me from a distance, his gaze unwavering. I felt a surge of frustration. Why couldn't he take the hint? I was here to work out, not to socialize or receive unwanted attention. I tried to shake off the feeling, reminding myself that I had every right to be there, just like everyone else. As I continued my workout, I felt a growing sense of dread. The excitement I had felt at the beginning of my session had been replaced by a heavy weight of discomfort. I wanted to finish my routine and leave, but I also didn't want to let Alex's behavior ruin my experience. I pushed through, focusing on my sets and trying to block out his presence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I completed my workout. I gathered my belongings and headed to the locker room, eager to escape the gym and the uncomfortable situation I had endured. As I walked, I couldn't help but reflect on the importance of personal boundaries. It was crucial to feel safe and respected in any environment, especially one dedicated to self-improvement. Once in the locker room, I took a moment to breathe deeply, allowing the tension to dissipate. I felt a sense of relief wash over me as I changed back into my street clothes. The experience had been unsettling, but I knew I had the power to set boundaries and advocate for myself. I reminded myself that it was okay to speak up when someone made me uncomfortable, regardless of their intentions. As I left the gym, I felt a mix of emotions. I was proud of myself for pushing through the discomfort and completing my workout, but I also felt a lingering unease about the encounter with Alex. I knew I wouldn't let it deter me from returning to the gym, but I would be more aware of my surroundings and the people in them. In the days that followed, I made a conscious effort to focus on my workouts and maintain my boundaries. I found solace in the familiar routines, reminding myself that the gym was my space, a place where I could grow stronger, both physically and mentally. I also began to pay closer attention to the dynamics around me, recognizing the importance of being aware of my surroundings and the people I interacted with. Eventually, I decided to speak with the gym management about my experience. I wanted to ensure that they were aware of the situation and that other members felt safe and respected. The manager listened attentively, expressing concern and assuring me that they would address the issue. It felt empowering to take action, to advocate for myself and others who might face similar discomfort. Reflecting on the experience, I realized that personal boundaries are essential in any environment, especially one where people come to improve themselves. It's important to feel safe and respected, and to trust one's instincts when something feels off. The gym should be a sanctuary for everyone, a place where individuals can focus on their goals without fear of unwanted attention or discomfort. In the end, I learned that it's okay to prioritize my well-being and to speak up when necessary. The experience, while uncomfortable, had taught me valuable lessons about self-advocacy and the importance of maintaining personal boundaries. I returned to the gym with renewed determination, ready to embrace my workouts and the community around me. all while remaining vigilant and aware of my surroundings. The excitement I had felt on that initial day returned, but now it was accompanied by a deeper understanding of the dynamics at play in shared spaces. I was committed to creating a positive experience for myself and others, ensuring that the gym remained a place of empowerment and growth. And as I stepped back into the familiar environment, I felt a sense of strength and resilience, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm golden hue over the landscape as I set out on my hike through the dense woods. The air was crisp and fresh, filled with the earthy scent of pine and damp leaves. I had always found solace in nature, and this particular trail was one of my favorites. A winding path that led deep into the heart of the forest, away from the noise of everyday life. As I walked, the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves created a soothing symphony, lulling me into a state of tranquility. With each step, I felt the stresses of the week melt away. The gentle crunch of twigs beneath my boots and the soft whisper of the wind through the trees enveloped me in a cocoon of peace. I paused for a moment to take in my surroundings, admiring the towering trees that stretched toward the sky, their leaves of vibrant green. The sunlight filtered through the branches, creating a dappled pattern on the forest floor that danced with the breeze. It was a perfect morning, and I felt grateful to be alive, surrounded by such beauty. As I continued along the trail, I lost myself in thought, reflecting on my life and the changes I wanted to make. The hike was a form of meditation for me, a chance to reconnect with myself and the world around me. I felt invincible, as if nothing could disturb the serenity of this moment. But as I rounded a bend in the path, that sense of peace was abruptly shattered. There, standing just off the trail, was a figure cloaked in shadows. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination conjured by the solitude of the woods. But as I blinked and focused, the figure became clearer. A tall, slender silhouette, partially obscured by the underbrush. My heart raced as I took a step back, instinctively feeling that something was not right. The figure stood motionless, its features hidden beneath a dark hood, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. The peaceful ambience of the forest had been replaced by an unsettling tension that hung in the air like a thick fog. I wanted to turn and run, to escape the feeling of being watched, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. The figure remained silent, and I could feel my pulse quickening as I tried to gauge its intentions. Was it a fellow hiker, a lost traveler, or something far more sinister? As I stood there, the figure slowly raised its head, and I caught a glimpse of its face, or rather, the lack of one. Where a face should have been, there was only an empty void, a dark abyss that seemed to absorb the light around it. My breath caught in my throat, and a wave of primal fear washed over me. I stumbled backward, my instincts screaming at me to flee. The woods, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap, and I was the prey. In that moment, the figure took a step forward, its movements unnaturally smooth and deliberate. Panic surged through me, and I turned on my heel, sprinting down the trail as fast as my legs could carry me. The sound of my heartbeat thundered in my ears, drowning out the rustling leaves and the chirping birds. I could feel the weight of the figure behind me, as if it were pursuing me through the trees, but I dared not look back. The path twisted and turned, and I pushed myself to run faster, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I could hear the branches snapping underfoot, the crunch of leaves echoing in the stillness of the woods. My mind raced with thoughts of escape, of getting back to safety, but the fear of what lurked behind me propelled me forward. I could feel the air growing colder, the shadows deepening as I ran deeper into the forest. Finally, I burst into a clearing, the sunlight flooding over me like a warm embrace. I skidded to a halt, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned to look back, half expecting to see the figure emerging from the trees, but there was nothing, only the stillness of the woods, the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. I felt a mix of relief and confusion wash over me. Had it all been a hallucination, a trick of the light? But deep down, I knew what I had seen. The memory of that faceless figure lingered in my mind, a haunting image that refused to fade. I took a moment to collect myself, my hands trembling as I tried to calm my racing heart. The peaceful hike I had envisioned had turned into a nightmare, and I felt a sense of loss for the tranquility I had once felt. As I made my way back to the trailhead, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that clung to me like a shadow. The woods, once a place of refuge, now felt foreign and threatening. I glanced over my shoulder frequently, half expecting to see the figure lurking just out of sight. The encounter had shattered my sense of safety, and I realized that the woods held secrets I was not meant to uncover. In the days that followed, I found it difficult to return to my normal routine. The image of the figure haunted my thoughts, invading my dreams and leaving me restless. I avoided the woods, opting for more populated areas where I could feel a sense of security. The fear had seeped into my daily life, making me hyper-aware of my surroundings, always on edge, always looking over my shoulder. I began to question everything I had once believed about nature and the peace it brought me. The woods, which had been a sanctuary, now felt like a labyrinth of uncertainty. I found myself drawn to the stories of the supernatural, of lost souls and wandering spirits, searching for answers to the encounter that had left me so shaken. I spoke to friends and family about my experience, hoping to find some comfort in shared stories, but their responses varied from skepticism to concern. One evening, I decided to return to the woods, determined to confront my fear. I gathered my courage and set out on the same trail, armed with a flashlight and a sense of resolve. As I walked, the familiar sounds of the forest surrounded me, but the atmosphere felt different, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. I reached the spot where I had seen the figure, my heart racing as I scanned the area for any sign of it. But there was nothing, only the rustling of leaves and the distant call of a bird. I stood there for a moment, grappling with my emotions. Had I imagined it all? Was it simply a figment of my imagination, fueled by fear and isolation? I took a deep breath, trying to ground myself in the present, but the memory of that faceless figure lingered like a ghost in the back of my mind. As I turned to leave, I felt a chill run down my spine, and I glanced back one last time. The woods were silent, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. The encounter had changed me, shifting my perspective on the world around me. I realized that nature, while beautiful, could also be unpredictable and mysterious. From that day forward, I approached my hikes with a newfound awareness. I learned to respect the woods and the unknown, understanding that there were forces at play beyond my comprehension. The experience had taught me the importance of intuition and the need to listen to my instincts. I became more attuned to my surroundings, more cautious in my explorations, and more appreciative of the beauty that coexisted with the darkness. The memory of the figure would always linger in the back of my mind, a reminder of the fragility of safety and the mysteries that lay hidden in the woods. I continued to hike, but I did so with a sense of reverence, acknowledging the power of nature and the stories it held. The encounter had left an indelible mark on my psyche, shaping my perspective on the world and the experiences that awaited me in the great outdoors. In the end, I learned that fear could be a powerful teacher, guiding me to a deeper understanding of myself and the world around me. The woods would always hold their secrets, but I was no longer afraid to explore them. I had faced my fears and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the beauty and mystery of nature, even in the face of the unknown. In this video, we explored several critical themes surrounding the importance of awareness and caution in unfamiliar situations. We began by discussing how our instincts often serve as our first line of defense when we encounter something that feels off or unsettling. The narratives shared highlighted the necessity of being attuned to our surroundings, whether we are hiking in the woods, visiting an abandoned place, or even engaging with others in everyday settings. The key takeaway here is that maintaining a heightened sense of awareness can help us navigate potentially dangerous situations and protect ourselves from harm. We also delved into the psychological aspects of fear and the unknown, encouraging viewers to reflect on their own experiences. Many of us have faced moments where our intuition warned us of danger, yet we often dismiss these feelings. By sharing personal stories and examples, we aim to illustrate how fear can manifest in various forms and how it is a natural response to unfamiliar circumstances. We invited viewers to consider their own encounters with fear, whether they were minor inconveniences or more significant events, and to recognize the lessons learned from those experiences. Throughout the video, we emphasized the importance of setting personal boundaries and respecting the boundaries of others. This is particularly relevant in social situations, where misinterpretations can lead to discomfort or conflict. By fostering an environment of mutual respect and understanding, we can create safer spaces for ourselves and those around us. As we wrapped up the discussion, we encouraged viewers to take these insights to heart and apply them in their daily lives. Awareness and caution are not just about avoiding danger. They are about empowering ourselves to make informed decisions and to trust our instincts. We reminded everyone that it's okay to prioritize personal safety and to speak up when something feels wrong. Finally, we invited viewers to engage with our content further. If you found the themes discussed in this video resonant or thought-provoking, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel for more insightful discussions. Don't forget to like the video and share it with friends and family who might benefit from these important messages. Your support helps us continue to create content that fosters awareness, reflection, and growth. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video.
The Watcher in the Woods. I had always loved hiking alone. There's something serene about being enveloped by nature, away from the noise of everyday life. But one particular trip into the woods changed everything. It was late autumn, the leaves a fiery tapestry of red and gold. I set off early, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. As I ventured deeper, the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves faded, replaced by an eerie silence that made my skin crawl. I brushed it off. Nature can be quiet sometimes. After a couple of hours, I stumbled upon a small clearing. The sunlight filtered through the trees, creating a beautiful scene that felt almost surreal. I decided to take a break, sipping water while soaking in the tranquility. But as I sat there, a strange feeling washed over me, as if I was being watched. I glanced around, dismissing the thought as paranoia, just the trees, I told myself. Yet the feeling persisted. I couldn't shake the sensation that someone, or something, was lurking just beyond my line of sight. I stood up, trying to shake off the unease, and decided it was time to head back. As I turned, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. A figure darted between the trees. My heart raced. I squinted, trying to make sense of it, but nothing was there. Just shadows playing tricks on me, I reasoned. I quickened my pace, my instincts screaming that I needed to leave. The path I had taken now felt foreign. Every twist and turn seemed unfamiliar, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. I glanced over my shoulder repeatedly, but all I saw were the gnarled branches swaying in the wind. Eventually, I reached a fork in the trail. One path led back toward the parking area, the other deeper into the woods. My gut told me to take the first, but something tugged at my curiosity. I took the second path, convinced it would lead me back quicker. The deeper I went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The trees closed in, their twisted trunks and thick branches blocking the sunlight. I heard a faint rustling behind me, but chose to ignore it, focusing on finding my way back. After what felt like an eternity, I stumbled into another clearing, one I had never seen before. Panic set in as I realized I was hopelessly lost. Just as I started to turn back, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. There, among the trees, stood a figure, a tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes staring directly at me. I froze, my breath hitching in my throat. His skin was pale, almost gray, and he wore tattered clothing that blended with the bark of the trees. "Help me," he croaked, his voice raspy and barely audible. I could see his mouth moving, but I felt a pull inside me not to approach him. I turned to run, heart pounding, but he called out again, "You can't escape." The words chilled me to the bone. I bolted down the path, branches snagging at my clothes, the sound of footsteps echoing behind me. I didn't look back until I reached the fork again. The other path seemed like a bad idea, but I had no choice. I chose it, praying it would lead me out. I ran blindly, my breath coming in ragged gasps, fueled by adrenaline. Finally, I spotted a glimmer of light through the trees, the parking area. I sprinted toward it, fear giving me strength. I burst through the tree line and into the open, collapsing against my car. I looked back, half expecting the figure to emerge from the woods, but there was nothing. just the rustling leaves and the fading light of day. I drove away, heart racing, vowing never to hike alone again. Months later, I still think about that day. What was that figure? Was he really lost, or was he something else entirely? Sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear his voice echoing in my mind, a reminder that not all who wander in the woods make it back. The caller. I had just settled into bed when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway, half expecting a robocall. "Hello," I said, but all I heard was heavy breathing on the other end. I hung up, brushing it off as a prank. It was late, after all. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It was the same number. I ignored it, feeling uneasy. Then came the text. "I see you." My heart sank. I glanced out my window into the darkness, seeing only my quiet street. Trying to shake off the fear, I turned off my phone and went to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind raced, imagining the worst. The next morning, I received another message. "You shouldn't have ignored me." I decided to block the number. A week passed, and I thought I was in the clear. Then, late one night, I heard a noise outside my window, a soft tapping. My heart raced as I crept to the curtain, peering through the slats. Nothing, just the empty street. I returned to bed, feeling foolish for being scared. Then my phone buzzed again. It was a new message, "Look outside." My breath caught in my throat. I froze, staring at the screen. Against my better judgment, I approached the window. When I looked out, my heart dropped. There, in the moonlight, stood a figure. I couldn't see their face, but they were staring directly at me. Panicking, I backed away, tripping over my own feet. I fumbled for my phone to call the police. Just as I hit dial, the figure moved closer. I could barely breathe, fear paralyzing me. Then I heard the most chilling sound, my own voice echoing from the phone. "I see you." I turned to my screen in horror, realizing the figure was right outside, mocking me. The basement. My grandmother's house was old and creaky, but I loved visiting her during the summer. She had a basement filled with antiques, and one day curiosity got the better of me. I ventured down the rickety stairs, the air growing colder with each step. Dust danced in the beams of light filtering through the small window. My grandmother had always warned me never to go down there alone, but I was determined to explore. As I rummaged through boxes, I found an old, ornate mirror. It looked out of place, the glass clouded with age. I wiped it with my sleeve, and my reflection blinked back at me, except it didn't look quite right. For a moment, I saw not just myself, but a dark figure behind me in the mirror. I spun around, but the basement was empty. Shaking off the sensation, I turned back to the mirror. The figure was gone, but now my reflection looked distorted, grinning maliciously. I felt a chill run down my spine. "This is ridiculous," I muttered, attempting to shake off my fear. But every time I looked away, I could feel its presence creeping closer. Suddenly, I heard my grandmother calling from upstairs. Relieved, I set the mirror down and rushed to the stairs. As I ascended, I glanced back. The reflection was still there, grinning wider. I never went back to the basement again. To this day, I wonder what I really saw that day. Sometimes, late at night, I think I can hear whispers from below, beckoning me to return. The doll. I inherited an old porcelain doll from my aunt when she passed away. It was beautiful, albeit a bit eerie with its cracked face and lifelike eyes. I placed it on my shelf, but soon after strange things began to happen. At first, it was subtle. I'd find the doll turn slightly, its gaze seemingly following me. I brushed it off as my imagination, but then one night, I awoke to the sound of soft giggling. I glanced at the clock. It was 2:00 a.m. My heart raced as I listened. The giggling continued, growing louder. I sat up, scanning my dark room. That's when I noticed the doll was no longer on the shelf. I leaped out of bed, scanning the room in a panic. Suddenly, I spotted it in the corner, standing upright on the floor. My breath caught in my throat. "What the hell?" I whispered to myself. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, revealing the doll standing there, as if it had been placed intentionally. I picked it up, my hands shaking, and put it back on the shelf. The giggling stopped immediately, and I felt a strange calm wash over me. I convinced myself it was a prank or a dream. The next day, I decided to get rid of the doll. I placed it in a box and took it to the local thrift shop. As soon as I got home, my phone buzzed. A notification from a social media group. Look what I found. It was a picture of the doll, smiling eerily from the shop window. Panic surged through me. I rushed back to the store, but the doll was gone. It was as if it had vanished into thin air. Now I keep hearing that giggle, sometimes in the dead of night. I'm terrified it's coming for me, that it's still out there, waiting for me to take it back. The shadow in the hall. It was a rainy night, and I had just settled in for a cozy evening with a book. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but I felt safe in my little apartment. As I turned the pages, I noticed a shadow flicker at the edge of my vision. I glanced up, but there was nothing there, just the empty hallway. I tried to brush it off, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I focused on my book, but the shadows seemed to dance along the walls. Eventually, I decided to make some tea, hoping it would calm my nerves. As I walked into the kitchen, I felt it again, a chill creeping up my spine. I turned to look back at the hallway. This time, I was sure I saw something move. It was quick, just a blur, but it felt like it was watching me. My heart raced. I made my tea and returned to the living room, but the uneasy feeling didn't dissipate. After finishing a few pages, I decided to take a break and check my phone. As I scrolled, I heard a soft whisper echo from the hallway. "Come play." I froze, my throat tightened. I wanted to dismiss it as my imagination, but something deep inside urged me to stay silent, to not respond. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Come play with me." Terror gripped me. I tiptoed to the hallway, peering into the darkness. My heart pounded as I felt the temperature drop. Suddenly, the lights flickered and I saw it, a small dark figure standing at the end of the hall, staring at me. I backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its gaze burning into me. I stumbled back into the living room, grabbing my phone to call for help, but the power went out. Darkness enveloped me. The whisper came again, closer now. "Why are you running?" I could barely breathe as I fumbled for a flashlight. Just as I turned it on, the figure lunged toward me. I screamed, bolting for the front door. I slammed it shut behind me and ran into the rain, not looking back until I reached the streetlight down the block. I spent the night with a neighbor, too terrified to return home. I never did find out what that shadow was, but every time it storms now, I hear the whispers creeping back into my mind. The last train. I was returning home late one night after a long day at work. The subway was mostly empty, save for a few scattered passengers. I found a seat and settled in, grateful for the brief moment of quiet. The train jerked forward, the familiar hum lulling me into a daze. At the next stop, an old man boarded. He was disheveled, his clothes tattered, and his eyes were wide and unblinking. He sat across from me, staring intently. I felt a chill as he grinned, revealing yellow teeth. I looked away, trying to focus on my phone. The train rattled through the dark tunnels, and I felt the atmosphere shift. The lights flickered ominously, and I glanced back at the old man. He was still staring, but now his grin was wider, more unsettling. Suddenly, the lights went out completely, plunging the carriage into darkness. A few startled gasps echoed in the gloom. I felt my heart race as I fumbled for my phone.